my mom, God rest her soul, would tell me often that, you're no better than anybody else. She wouldn't say it the other way around. She would always tell me that, and always tell me, I want you to treat people the way you want to be treated. And those two things she said at an early age until I went off to college stuck with me, obviously, until this very day. I witnessed police brutality with my father being pulled over with me in the car as a young boy. Witnessed it myself as a 21-year-old rookie being pulled over, pulled out of the car. And the crazy thing about that story, it was 3 a.m. I was coming back from a club, and like I said, I was a rookie, just got in the NBA. And when I asked the officers, what did I do or what's going on, when I was leaving, when they gave me back my driver's license and my registration, and I assumed that they went to the car and kind of found out or heard that, hey, this is the new rookie with the Lakers. Then they told me I can go, and they told me, well, a white Mercedes-Benz was stolen tonight, a couple hours ago, and you fit the description. Well, the Mercedes-Benz I was driving was red. And so I knew then that, it was just straight profiling, that you saw a black man in the car and you're just going to pull him over just to pull him over. So I obviously, growing up in Inglewood, I've experienced, a lot of what's going on in our world today. And I think Charlie and our relationship is exactly what the world needs to hear and see more of, in the questions that we have to ask each other on a day-to-day basis. Again, my mom told me I wasn't any better than anybody else because I bounced the ball, but nobody was better than me because of the color of their skin. Everybody should be treated equally.
Sure. He often saw people leading cows and leading oxen that were pulling carts, and if they weren't moving fast enough, the person would whip them and say, "Keep moving, you Jew." So that was the first time I ever heard something about a Jew in a negative context. And Harry Wills became a very close friend of my mother's. And so now they're in Queens, and the first people they had to dinner were Harry Wills and his wife, Sarah, who was also Black, but very light complected. The next day, the manager of the apartment building knocked on the door, and my father spoke no English, so my mother was talking to him, and she turned red. My father said, "What was this about?" The manager had said, "We don't condone having our residents invite mixed race couples to the building." My father immediately said, "We're moving out."
But I've seen it so often in the neighborhoods that I grew up with, that it almost becomes a norm. If you're a black man in America, living in Inglewood where I grew up, or living in Los Angeles, right down the street, or Compton, it almost becomes a norm of this is how it's going to be. Most of us was around, when the Rodney King thing happened as well, 28 years ago. And we talked about having changed then, and nothing has really changed, like you said. And I think, this one is obviously a lot more serious because of the fact that we were able to see this on video just like that. But this one resulted into a man's death. And now I think America, not just Black America, I think America is in an uproar over injustice being done on the streets, people of brown and Black color. So I think the first thing is obviously, we all have to sit down at the table and talk about it. I think the second thing is education. I think you have to educate yourself on, like I did with Charlie and like he did with me. And when I mean educating with Charlie and I, my education to Charlie was take him to a soul food restaurant in the neighborhood I grew up with.
Of the people at the gym constantly coming up to us and saying, "What do you two have in common?" They thought it was funny, and they were obviously looking at the difference in physicality and color, etc. They never waited to hear the answer. They'd ask the question, and then they'd move on and think it was just very funny. But to me, that is what's wrong with what's going on in America today and globally. that nobody takes the time to really find out what somebody is about.
Well, my thought about the comment "shut up and just shut up and dribble" is everybody has a right to voice their opinion. Uh, LeBron has that right as a person to voice, not just an athlete, but as a person, because he, first of all, he has a platform, and he has millions of people that want to hear from him. Sometimes from a political standpoint on where he stands. So for him to be able to express his opinion, I think is a great thing. It opens the door for other athletes who want to express their opinion, but some of them are afraid to do that. So for her to say "shut up and dribble," just shows that she has no clue of what's going on in the world today. Because again, we're talking about one of the best athletes in the world, one of the best players in the world, just voicing his opinion, and he has a right to do that. The Colin Kaepernick thing, again, he was taking a knee for the very thing that we're fighting right now for, equality, to stop police brutality. He wasn't taking a knee to disrespect the American flag. And I think he made that point very clear.
And the value system has to be one of, first and foremost, I'm going to treat everyone equally. And number two, because of all of this systemic racism that has been part of our credo as a country forever, what can I do to bring up the educational opportunities for those people who haven't had the same good fortune as the white population in this country? And corporations can play a big role in it, but government has to play a big role in it. And one of the things that I hope will come from the pandemic is if we can spend $3 trillion because people are out of work, we can spend $3 trillion to fix the infrastructure and fix the educational system that has really favored the white population over all people of color.
As far as the number one thing is education. Obviously that's big for people of color. We have to do a better job of giving them opportunities to get that education. Again, we just want equal opportunity. That's the biggest thing. I think healthcare is obviously something that's very important as well. So, but when you talk about from an economical standpoint, I think education, the educational system has to be changed.
And one thing that I would highly recommend and I would urge is that all corporations look at the makeup of their populations and make it a point to have their work populations reflect the population of the cities and communities that they are catering to.
And so if I was coaching again, especially a large group of guys, when you're talking about football or something like that, I would make sure that the black players wasn't rooming with the black players and the white players wasn't rooming with the white players and whatever other races that we had involved in that team, just so they can get a chance to know each other's culture and know each other as a person and as a human being. And I think, again, as we've talked about this from the start, that's the first step, is just sitting down and talking about it.
Without a doubt, we have a police problem, but that's just one small part of the bigger problem we have. And it comes back to education. We have to get income disparity fixed. We have to get the quality of the education on public school level fixed. We have to get the nutrition fixed.
I think every mayor, then down to the DAs of every district, and then down to the police chiefs of every police department have to take a much better look of screening police officers. I think that's the first thing. We got to get rid of the bad apples. And just like everything else, in every police department in America, there are great cops. There are great police officers. I know a lot of them here in Los Angeles that work for LAPD. They're terrific police officers. But it's just like that old saying, one bad apple spoils the bunch. And you have a bunch of bad apples in every department right now across the world that are spoiling the bunch. So I think, like you said, the first thing is admitting it. You know, being able to admit that that it is here, that is exactly what's going on, that there is white privilege. I read a letter by Carl Corver, who's in the NBA, and obviously the NBA is dominated, you know, by African Americans, but he had written in his letter how he has seen white privilege in the NBA, you know, being a white player. And I think that's, again, that's the first step, is being able to admit it, you know, and then talk about it, you know, because like you said, it is something that does exist, just like it exists for African Americans when they're driving down the street and the police car is behind them, to get nervous and think that they've done something wrong or that they might not make it home. You know, that's just a reality.
If there was one thing I would ask the college students to do, is to vote, and to vote their conscience on what they feel needs to be changed, and vote for candidates who are supporting the kinds of changes that they aspire to see happen. I would say also to the college students to get out of their respective bubbles and take risk around relationships, and spend time trying to get to know people who they don't know and don't understand the cultures they come from.
John, I'm looking for longevity. You know, I think after the Rodney King incident, we did the same thing. 2 or 3, you know, 6 months later, everything kind of went back to normal. I'm not looking at a short-term fix here, and I hope we aren't as a nation. I'm looking for longevity, for changes to be made that's going to stem past our lifetime, and that's the only way it's going to change. You know, we got to keep our voices heard. We can't let this die down in the next 6 months or the next year or the next 2 years. This has to be something that we continuously ask and demand justice, and that this gets better, you know, as a country. That's the only way we're going to be able to move forward, in my mind. Because again, I've seen it way too many times where we talk about it for 6 or 7 months and then it just kind of goes away and everything goes back to normal.
That you can never judge a book by its cover, and if you don't spend the time to figure out what that person is about, you're really missing an opportunity.
For me, very simple: treat everybody the way you want to be treated. You know better than anybody else. You know, equality is for everybody. You know, and I think that is so important.